What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of VV Nutrition Radio. This is your host, Andres, and I am here with one of my good friends and pro baseball player, Xavier Scruggs. Xavier, welcome to the show. What's going on, man?
Thanks for having me, Andres. I'm excited to be here, man.
Dude, you just started a podcast, and I don't know why I wanted to start off with that, but obviously this kind of like feels probably comfortable to you right now, right?
Yeah. It feels good. I'm used to being on the other side, but it's been
doing
cool.
The interviews.
Yeah, I love it because you learn so much about other people and you get to really dive into their background and everything. So
that's awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. So I'm probably going to do like sort of like an introduction, but I'm just going to do the basics of what I know. So right now you are the owner of a company called Xtradordinary Athletes, which is a podcast, and you're trying to kind of like help athletes improve the way that they kind of like carry themselves and to kind of turn into like sort of like good professionals just outside of sports. But before that, obviously you've been playing for a while. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about like sort of like your background, where have you played, and like kind of what got you to a point where you're in today?
Yeah, definitely. It started with me. I was a young athlete, maybe 11, 12 years old, watched a World Series game, grew up in San Diego, watched the Padres play against the New York Yankees. And I saw the way that these grown men were crying and hugging each other after they won the championship. And that was like the wake up call for me. It was like, I want something like this to make me that happy. So baseball was like that for me.
You were already playing then?
I was already playing a little bit, not taking it too seriously, but it was like that was the point where I was like, that would be cool to be a professional athlete, especially a baseball player. So I continued my baseball career, like growing up, doing travel ball, and then eventually high school, I was drafted by the Seattle Mariners, but it was in the last round. I had already committed to go to college, so it was an opportunity for me to say, okay, I'm good enough to get drafted, but let me take it to college because I have opportunity I had a college scholarship opportunity to continue my career and know that, okay, if I put in 3 more good years, I can get drafted again. So I did that, was drafted again after my 3rd year at UNLV, Las Vegas. Not the easiest place to go to school and play, but I was able to do it. Got drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals. Ended up playing 7 years in the minor leagues before I even got my first big league call up. So grinded out in the minor leagues, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, long bus rides, and eventually got to where I wanted to be. 2014 got called up, played with them, 14, 15, then 16 played with the Miami Marlins. Then became a free agent. Took it over to Korea to play over there. Amazing cultural experience over there, great baseball. And then played in Mexico last year. So I've kind of been all over, played in Dominican, played in Colombia, played in Mexico. So these multiple Latin countries, Asian countries, and here has just provided a great opportunity for me to, just extend my career. And baseball has been very, very good to me. So.
That's awesome. And I want to take it back a little bit because one of the things that we were talking about before we kind of started recording was the fact that baseball athletes, unlike other sports, like they have the chance to go straight from high school into pro athletes, but you chose not to go that route. Why?
I think because of my parents, they kind of emphasized the importance of a college education, and they both went to a 4-year university, so it was kind of like something that was ingrained in me, like, hey, education is important because say something happens and you're missed to climbing up to the big leagues, an injury, an unforeseen something happen, you have an opportunity to go and fall back on an education. So that was something that was always kind of ingrained in me, and seeing them and where they went to school, they went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California. So I got to see a little bit of that college atmosphere, that lifestyle when they would take me to their university. And it was like, man, I want to be a part of something like this. I want to go to a school and make more friends and learn about other people as well, but learn about other subjects and learn what I liked. So that was cool for me, and I got an opportunity to do that. And I'll never take it for granted.
And then when you look at other athletes that typically, because I'm sure when you're an 18-year-old, like it sounds fun. I mean, it sounds kind of tempting to like go and like sign a big contract or like, start making already money without you even, because I know there's like big offers that are being done to a lot of these athletes. And baseball in itself, it's its own world. And I feel like it's, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it. But, do you see like a lot of athletes not making that decision to go to college? And do you see sometimes that they take a path that maybe not be ideal? Like now when you look back into like either not necessarily friends, but people that you know of that they were like, you know what? No, I'm just going to go straight into pro baseball and I'm just going to kind of figure it out then.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of guys like that. And a lot of them kind of fall off to the wayside because one, they maybe weren't mature enough. Two, maybe they financially weren't educated and they used their money and then ended up getting released at some point. So you see that happen all the time. But there's guys that sign out of high school that do make it to the big leagues and have a long career. But a lot of times, for me, I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready. I needed to go to college. And I do see that with a lot of guys. And it's something I would like to see the guys do more is at least go to college and learn more about themselves, mature a little bit more. But then you have guys also coming from the Dominican, these Latin countries, they sign at 16, 17 years old. That's their one shot, so I understand that opportunity too. So there's just so much that goes into it, somebody's background, somebody's family, how they were raised. Everybody's different.
Which I think, and that's a good point, because I wanted to actually touch, I've talked to a lot of athletes. I think you and I met when you were playing in Korea and you would just come here for the off season to train at ASPE. But one of the things that I've noticed a lot in athletes that are even going to go into the pros, whether it's NFL, Major League Baseball, is that the way that they were brought up obviously defines a lot of like the way that they take care of themselves. As an example, with someone like, NFL athletes, it's like, a lot of times that they come from like really poor neighborhoods and things like that I feel like they don't even have access to a lot of food or a lot of access to education of like what's the right food. And obviously this is a nutrition podcast, so I feel like that's a huge part of it. And I know that you've noticed the big shift and change that can actually make in your performance, your wellness, your health. So when you look back, like what was your life like, and when it comes down to like growing up and accessibility to food, or like what your parents kind of ingraining you when it comes down to like nutrition, good and bad, that you feel like now that you look back?
Right. The one thing and this comes from my dad, he was always telling me, especially when I signed to go to college, is like, hey, this is going to be your career at some point. You have to take care of your one asset, and that's your body. At that point, I didn't realize he was talking so much about nutrition, but I was thinking more injuries, not smoking and drinking and stuff like that. But now I kind of look back and I'm like, if I would have played nutrition into that as much as I did some other things, maybe I have a longer career, maybe I have a better career, things like that. So it's funny because I didn't realize how much nutrition played a part until maybe I started talking to you, or maybe a year or two before that. And that's toward the end of my career. So for me, it was always an emphasis on taking care of your body, but I didn't play that nutrition part maybe as much as I should have, especially going to college. You're eating maybe pizza 3-4 times a week, drinking more than you should be, not drinking enough water, not getting the right amount of sleep. So you start to realize how important that stuff is when you become a professional, and then later on down the road, how it affects your body throughout your whole career.
So you knew it. So you knew that it was important, but there was obviously something which is not clicking. So when did it click, and why did you make a decision to start? And we'll get into the details of what really that looked like. But when was it that you kind of decided to say, like I need to kind of start changing something about my life and the way that I take care of myself to be better? Was it like injury related? Was it more like the way that you felt, or what was kind of like that part of you that said like, something needs to like change?
Yeah, I think for me it was, I specifically remember I was in AA, had just finished the season. Over the course of the season, I had gained like 10 pounds, and I noticed that something's not right here. A lot of guys are losing weight over the season. I'm gaining some weight. So I knew it had to be nutrition. I knew it had to be the way I was taking care of my body. And I went to a specific guy. He has a platform, I think it's called Formula 55. Jessica had used it before. So it was like a training and nutrition package deal. And I was like, let me try working out with this guy, see what he has to say about my nutrition and whatnot. And he was like, he broke it down to me. I don't know if it was the best nutrition for me, but at the time he kind of broke down fats, proteins, carbs, and was like, okay, let's put these meals together for you. So I started thinking about the way I eat. Maybe instead of eating 2 times a day, I was eating 5 times a day, but eating better nutritious meals for myself. And then I started seeing how that affected the way that I worked out, gave me that much more energy throughout the day. And I started to see, okay, nutrition plays a big part in the way that I work out. So why don't I take that into the way that I play as well during the season? Because I had started doing this in the off season. And so then I started to realize, okay, after that next season, I started to realize, okay, I didn't put on the same amount of weight. I actually stayed the same, being more conscious about the choices I made about my food and workouts. And then I started seeing the benefits. I made it to the big leagues the next year. So all throughout that course of a year, I learned so much about my own body, but then I actually saw the benefits on the field as well. So that was huge for me.
And this was from minor leagues to when you started playing with Cardinals?
This was the offseason of 2013, and then got to the big leagues in 2014. So I literally changed my whole body. I actually went from 220, I'm normally 220, I went down to I think about 205 at the start of the season. I knew naturally I'd gain a couple pounds, but I got down to 205 and my body was like as shredded as it's ever been. But at the same time, it was like the energy that was most important to me, because I was able to play a 162 game season without feeling tired, without feeling groggy. And I noticed the changes during that off season.
And in Major League, how many is it? Is it 180 something?
162 games without playoffs, so it could be more.
So one of my, I don't know if I told you, but like Francisco Cervelli, catcher for he was for the Pirates now, I think he's with the Marlins. Like he's sort of like a long distance constant of mine and really good friends. And one of the things that he and I had a conversation one time about the way that like he kind of grew up in certain ways, like, you know, when he was like in developmental kind of like teams in Dominica and stuff like that. And also, but he like explained a little bit more about the season, and it's like, it's so hectic because you just don't have barely any days off.
Right.
So I guess like, because I'd actually never understood a little bit more about what that looked like, but then you think your nutrition was, or how would you taking care of your nutrition when you were actually playing like 162 games every single year? And like with that craziness of like traveling to different places and stuff like that, how did you make it work?
I wasn't thinking about it. Honestly, when I first started, I wasn't thinking about it. I was, just eating what was provided by the team. And then if I was eating on my own, whatever I felt like eating. I wasn't keeping track of how I felt after.
You just ate to just eat.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't even looking at, okay, this is what I need to be eating. I wasn't looking at, okay, what's giving me energy, what's making me feel good, what's making me not feel good. Taking long bus rides, eating candy on the bus rides, like at 2:00 in the morning, like those were like some of the habits that I had. Until I kind of realized, okay, nutrition plays a point. In 2013, that's why I really realized what I eat plays a point in how I play. And that was huge for me, because it was eye-opening. It was like, okay, not only is this good for your baseball, but this is good for your life in general, right?
Yeah, because you start to understand the reasoning why, like, you're eating, okay, if I eat the candy, why am I eating candy? Well, it's just like because it's there, but versus like, okay, is this going to help me fuel my body for performance? It is going to. That's the thing with sports nutrition. It's always kind of having the idea of like, okay, is this going to make me perform my best, like during my, and I think a lot of times, like, I don't know if like you agree with this, but like in baseball, like especially baseball athletes don't necessarily, like, for example, like when you compare it to sports like soccer that are like more like super high intensity, just 90 minutes versus 4 hours, do you feel that because of the intensity of the sport that it's just more like quick bursts of energy type of thing? Do you think that's the main reason why sometimes like some of these athletes are not paying too much attention to their nutrition, or is it more of a cultural thing in your opinion?
I think it's more of the first option that you mentioned, just because we know that we're not running around the 24/7, like soccer or like a basketball. I think it's because we know that power, or whatever size we are as a player, it doesn't even matter what body types we have. Every type of player can produce at some point, the smallest player, the biggest player. So I think it's like body type doesn't really play a part when we're thinking about what we need to be doing off the field, eating wise, or how it plays into the game. I think you don't really think about those things if you're not versed on, okay, these are some of the options, these are some of the choices that you can make. And talking about those choices, you start to realize, okay, when I go to the grocery store now to get the food, like I can make better decisions instead of just picking up whatever. Like I need to actually look at what is behind the actual carton, or what's behind the nutrition. And so I think that started playing a big part in my life, and now I have 2 boys, so like I want to make sure that I'm moving around well enough to play with them. It's not just baseball now.
Yeah.
So
that's a huge thing, because I think I would just call it longevity, right? So I think baseball is one of the sports that has like the longest, like, the rate, like the life of an athlete is like the longest compared to sports like football, and other things like that. And with some exceptions like golf, it probably like around the same. So I think a lot of times like athletes like just look at the short term like of that, right? And then they don't understand like the impact of longevity. What happens when you're playing and you're 30? And that's the conversation I was having with Francisco, and when he also kind of, because it's very similar. It's crazy to think that many of these athletes are making this shift towards like the end of their 20s,
right? And
they all have the same kind of narrative. Like, I wish I would have done something a little bit different earlier, because maybe like my performance, my body would feel kind of like a little bit better. And I think I was just talking to your wife, Jess, the other day, and she was just mentioning that, like X now feels better than he used to feel like, years ago. So what does that mean for you? Like, you feel like right now it's because of the way that you treat your body, the way that you move and things like that, compared to like when you were in your 20s?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy that you think about it, because like when you're in your 20s, that's younger than your 30s, you should be moving better. You should feel better. You should feel more energetic. But I think now it's kind of just like, hey, I've come to the realization of how important that stuff is. And it's not just the training aspect, because before the training comes the nutrition, the way that you actually, whatever you put in your body. So I started to realize that, and I feel like the reason why I feel better is because of, going and learning about certain things myself, instead of just expecting somebody to tell me about it. Like, I started to get the urge to say, okay, let me find out more about this. Let me read about this. Let me go to a dietitian, nutritionist, figure out some of these things that are best for me. And that was kind of what I was able to start doing at ASPE as well. And then incorporate that to my workouts, and not my workouts necessarily into my nutrition, the other way around. So I felt like that was the light bulb kind of going off for me. And like I mentioned before, it's more than just baseball. It's life. Like, I look at my parents and I'm like, okay, those are the same decisions that now I understand why they made some of those decisions and why they fed us certain things, because that's what they grew up on, So I look at soul food now differently today, because it's so heavy. So probably the stuff that I don't want to be eating before a game, the stuff that I don't want to be eating when I'm playing a long 9-inning game, a 3-4 hour inning game. Like, there's certain things that I feel like now I realize, okay, this is why you felt a certain way then, and this is why you feel a certain way now.
Yeah, I think that's huge, man. And I think, again, like how you grew up and the why, understanding obviously the reason and the purposes behind some of those different things. And I think that kind of like makes a big impact into the process. Now, when we kind of like switch gears into talk about more like what you do now, because I always like to kind of like understand like what is like the routine of an athlete, like how do you compare it? For example, right now it's sort of like off season and we're in the middle of COVID and all these different things obviously kind of threw a lot of people off. Right. But what does like your typical day look like when you're in season versus when you're off season? Like, say for example, let's start obviously with the off season, which is what you're currently doing right now, like training, eating, like, obviously you have a podcast and all those different things like that. But I'm super curious as to like, okay, what does like a typical day of an athlete like right now looks like? Yeah,
definitely. For me, it's, I'm more of an early riser. I try to get up early, get the workout in early.
What's early for you though?
Like 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Nice.
I try to get out of the way early, because I feel like if I wait toward the end of the day, which a lot of baseball guys do, they like to work out in the middle of the day. I can't do that. So I got to work out early, get out of the way. And another reason why a lot of baseball guys like to work out later is because they like to do their baseball stuff before they work out. I like to work out before, because if I know that maybe I'm a little tired that day, I know I can do a little bit less with my baseball. But I don't want to sacrifice my workout, especially in the off season. So early on, still working out with our guy, Yo Murphy, get it in early, maybe the actual strength and conditioning part, maybe 6:30, then try to get some speed work in right after that, maybe eat before the speed work, get that in. Then I'm to the field, doing ground balls, defense first, ground balls, outfield drills, And then I'll take it to the cage, start getting a lot of swings in. During the off season, you can get more swings in usually than you do in the season. So I get maybe 100, 200 swings in, whether that be in the cage or whether that be actually on the field, working on something, whether that be driving the ball to the right side or, driving the ball to the left side, trying to figure out something there. And then about, 1 o'clock, get something to eat, make sure I take a nap. I'm a big napper. I gotta get a nap in. Sleep is the best form of recovery, right?
Yeah, dude,
so
that's right.
I get my nap in every day, probably like 1 to 3, maybe 2 to 4. And then that leaves me the rest of the time to be with the boys, especially during the off season. Just hanging out with them throughout the rest of the day. Thank God for Jess. She's able to, now work and
Super
be able to
mom.
hang out with them. Yeah, so that's good. But during the season, and I'm sure Francisco's told you a lot about this, is like you're basically at the field from 1 till about, 10, 11 o'clock. And what that looks like there is once you get to the field, it's a lot of video. You're watching game film. You're watching who's pitching that day. For him as a catcher, he's watching, the base runners too. So for me, I'm watching a lot of film before the game, maybe 1 to 2, 2 to 3, getting in swings in the cage at the stadium, 3 to 4, make sure I'm getting good stretching. Make sure I'm getting a good lunch, maybe second lunch before we actually go out to the field. During the field, we have a pregame, which is, infield, outfield drills. You're swinging in the cage, you're swinging on the field, get done around 6, and then 6 to 7, you're just relaxing before the game starts. And once 7 hits, it's time to go.
That's crazy. Because most people think of you guys and they look at you out there, but then they think like, oh, he just got here to play. And
right.
He just got out the door. You've been there since 12, 1 o'clock and just grinding from early. And you do that how many days a week? Like here in the US and MLB is 5, 6 games a week?
6 days a week, yeah.
It's literally you're in the office from that's from 12 or 1 o'clock up until 10, and then you're not even kind of winding down until later at this. You don't really go to bed at
That's the tough thing about baseball is you don't wind down until probably 12, 1 o'clock because you still have that energy that's
what he described.
That adrenaline going after the game.
Yeah, that's crazy because you spend so much time there. So that's huge. And I guess another big part too of this is when you go, because you played in many different countries. Right. How did you adjust to your not only habits, specifically nutrition, Korea? Tell us about Korea, because that is something that I was okay, how would you eat in there? What was the culture? What was it like when you even got there at first?
Man, I was literally just talking about this on the ESPN KBO broadcast. They asked me about eating and the food over there, and for me, that was the toughest thing. It's getting used to, they don't eat normal breakfast that we eat over here. I would egg whites, maybe some granola and yogurt, but over there it's soup and rice for breakfast. And I'm no, I can't be doing this. So that's why it was for 2 weeks, Jessica wasn't there, maybe for 3 weeks before I first got there. And then when she got there, she kind of helped me get back into routine. She was able to go groceries, find the things that we needed. I could have did that, but I'm just a little lazier than her. So she was able to really research and find, okay, this is what we need. We leaned on our translator. He was able to find a lot of stuff we had to get shipped in over from the US.
Really?
Because
what?
We wanted to try to stay with our nutrition because they don't have a lot of the same stuff. And if they do, it was coming from Seoul, which is the big city over there, their capital. We were living in Changwon, which was a small ship port city that didn't get a lot of the same stuff that they got. Mm-hmm. So that was important for us to try to get some of that same nutrition stuff that we were really focused on in the US. But it was tough. It was tough in the first couple of weeks. And but the good thing about their food is no preservatives. Everything's usually pretty fresh. And that was something that I noticed, still eating a lot of their food, I was able to stay in good shape. I still felt energized. I was able to still track the carbs, the macros and everything like that. So that was good for me. They take care, their nutrition is very important over there as well.
So it is important, it's just different.
Yes, exactly. It was a transition trying to get used to figuring out, what are some of these foods first of all, and making sure I'm eating the right portions, the right amount.
Now, did you do have a good mix between like the type of foods? Like, did you get a chance to kind of have a little more like soul foods and more like comfort stuff like that over there, and combining with like rice and a lot of like, stuff like this?
Yeah, it was a transition at first, but then finding out some of these different restaurants, especially when I went to some of these bigger cities, was easier for me. So like when we were on the road, I was like taking advantage of going to find good breakfast spots. I need pancakes, bacon, and eggs sometimes, So I would do that. And then when we come back home, it was like, okay, let's get back to the routine, or Jessica cooking at the house, and figuring out. The good thing too is we had a nanny our second year when we had Zeke over there. And she was able to cook very healthy Korean meals over there as well. So that was huge for me, because I'd get breakfast or lunch before I even went to the field. And then at the field, they had a good buffet of choices from their cafeteria. So that was good for me.
Okay, so you did have obviously things to choose from. Now, did you bring any?
I just had to figure out what they were at first, because a lot of
you're like, what does that mean?
I wasn't a big Asian food eater, For me, I was never really into Asian food, but when I started learning, and like you said, I would have to ask, what is that? Is that pork? Is that is that chicken? Is that dog?
Then you're like, is that a dog? Because I want to know what you were eating.
They would always joke around with me like, hey, don't eat that X, that's dog right there.
Now, is there anything like you brought from there that you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, and now you even implement it from kind of like culture like wise and then food wise, like from Korea, that now you just like even make it part of your current life right now?
Yeah, man. I know they have this kind of paste that goes on like everything from rice to meat, and it's called samjang. And it's something that I've actually taken, instead of like salt, I use it because it's more of it adds flavor, but at the same time it's a little spicy. So I found myself putting that on some meat dishes, my steak, a little bit of when I use rice. I know Jess, she'll cook the Cuban dishes, and sometimes I'll throw that on there.
Like literally Cuban.
A roco boy, a picadillo, so
all the good stuff.
I use it on everything.
Nice, man. And then obviously after Korea, then you sign a contract in Mexico, and obviously Mexico is a completely different thing, but probably more variety. And I feel like because we live in the US and there's like that Mexi, like, marry Mexican, like sort of like thing. So was it a little bit easier for you, especially like, because I know you've been playing there for like 1 year, right?
Right. The easiest part for me was I was able to actually go to the restaurants and I could read the words. Like in Korea, like the characters, I didn't know what I was eating. So like I knew what the place was, I knew what they had, and that was the best part for me, is because growing up in San Diego, I was exposed to a lot of Mexican food, a lot of Mexican dishes. And I was able to go get some of those favorites. I was able to even try a lot of different things because I was there for maybe 6 months. So traveling, we've talked about this a little bit beforehand. Traveling over there, there's so many different types of food, so many different, it's almost as big as the United States. So you're going to all these different areas, and it's like all of them have different types of food. All of them specialize in something different. So I was able to find different foods, have more options. South Korea is so small, you're only going to get a certain amount of options.
Yeah, dude.
So that was the cool thing about Mexico.
Yeah, and I feel like you have like a lot of, like, unlike other players that don't have like the exposure to like being in different places and even like seeing how other players and pro athletes actually live their lives. And that's a really interesting thing I wanted to ask you. How do you compare an American pro athlete compare, and not whether it's good or bad, but more like customs, cultures, like when you look at like a Korean, like that was born and raised there versus like a Mexican athlete, for example, that like was born and raised there, but they're all, you guys share one thing in common, you're very talented, you have obviously you're playing pro baseball. Like what were some of the differences that you noticed, like when you were kind of comparing people from like whether it's nutrition, like health, and all those different things?
I would say America, we're exposed to so many resources here. So I would say that we're a step ahead of some of these other countries, especially the Latin countries, because I feel like nutrition sometimes takes a step back over there because maybe baseball or the sport is all that they have. So their focus is, okay, let me just focus on baseball. Nutrition, that could go off to the wayside. It was tough for me to see because I know that it can play a huge role in how much better that they can be.
Yeah, and I think me growing up in Venezuela, and baseball was huge, but then you go to like the stadiums and everything, and you don't really see the same level of like the facilities or like the resources that I feel like they have. So and I think it's getting better because like right now I've noticed that, for example, Major League Baseball athletes or like teams, like they have to have a dietitian, and they have other dietitians that are traveling to like the development teams and like Dominican and all these different places. So I think that's something that is like slowly shifting because they're understanding. It's like the way that in Latin America, the way it kind of works is like, okay, they wait like 5 to 10 years until things like kind of develop in the US, which is kind of like a model country, and then they adopt it. So it just kind of takes a little like while for like them to be able to kind of like see some of those different things changing. So yeah, that's huge. Besides nutrition, and one of the things in vegan nutrition that we kind of emphasize is like nutrition is just only one piece of the equation in health and overall wellness. You talked about sleep, and obviously that being like one of the things that you do for recovery. What are some of the things that you've learned to implement into your routines that, you know, whether sleep, naps, and stuff like that, and all those different areas that you feel like have also impacted you positively in your health and in your fitness as well?
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned sleep as in naps, but also another thing for me is like meditation and just reading too, because I think that's big for my mental health. And being able to start the day off right, being able to have that routine first and foremost. And talking about a routine too is just organization. Understanding, okay, this is what I need to do today, and making sure that I write those things down, and then really making sure I do them. If I say I'm going to take a nap, I try to be consistent with taking a nap 1 to 3, 2 to 4 every day. And if I don't, I can tell the difference a lot of the time. Same thing if you're sleeping and you don't get your 7 or 8 hours of sleep, like your body feels different. Another thing with me is I make sure I'm drinking my 1 or 2 gallons of water a day, because the liquids are huge for me. I feel like if I don't have the hydration, I'm not going to be able to go do my workout. I'm not going to be able to stay energized from 2 to 10 at the field all day. So that's another thing that's important to me, and I just feel like there's a lot that goes into it. Even for me, the stretching and the mobility, the flexibility, I gotta make sure that that's important too, because it's, as an athlete, sometimes we think, okay, let's go hit the weight room, but sometimes we forget the little things like the mobility and how that affects, we talked about the longevity of a career. Like, so even though there's so many different things, and what my point is, I try to organize those things in a way that, okay, I need to do these things every day. And being a professional athlete, that's huge, because you understand the benefits of doing those things consistently, not just one day out of the week, but every single day. And you see how your body reacts, you see how your mental reacts. And I think, and even for me, like, I want Jessica to see that too. I want her to see, like, I'm taking care of myself. I want her to follow suit, and for the boys. So we want to be a good foundation for them, and not start later on down the road, not let them just eat whatever they want now and realize, okay, we need to change later on down the road. Like, no, let's be examples for ourselves first, and then they can see how we're setting the stage for them.
And when you talk about, because I love you mentioned the word meditation, I'm a huge believer in that. I think it's like mindfulness is one of like the most underrated, like not only recovery, but also stress management, like techniques that anybody can kind of like apply. Sleep and all the different routines and habits you develop over time. Did you do those overnight, or this is something that you kind of developed some, like, it took you time to develop? And the reason I ask this question is because I feel like many people, regardless of, people listening to this, whether they're athletes, whether they're just people trying to improve their health, weight loss, whatever may be the case, sometimes they have this notion that they have to do this like laundry list of things, like in order for them to be able to kind of get to like X result. Like, you have to now meditate, you have to now sleep 8 hours, you now have to have like, count your macros, do all these different things. Did you do those like all overnight, or did it take you a while to kind of build those into those?
It took me a long time to learn those things, and there was always an eye-opening experience too for the next thing. I feel like for me, this past season, or the season before, I realized, okay, you like to read, but you weren't reading at all during the whole season. You know how much reading helps you to be able to relax. So then I kind of was like, okay, let me get to reading. And start implementing that every day. But all these things kind of just opened my eye. Even when I was taking classes a couple of years ago to finish my degree at UNLV, and I had a sociology class, and you just talked a little bit about stress. And I realized how much stress plays an impact on your heart and your condition as far as that goes. And that, heart conditions are one of the top things that kill people today, if not the top in the US. So I started learning about that. And I'm like, okay, I need to make sure my stress levels are down. And what can I do to make sure that I'm playing a part in that and being healthy about that? So I realized, okay, let's try to meditate. Let's try to read. Prayer is a big part of my life. So always trying to pray, and I noticed that kind of helps relieve stress for me as well. And I try to do a lot of those things, and I started learning that it's better for me to do those things in the morning. That way it kind of helps me throughout the whole day.
Like a morning routine for you.
Exactly. So I try to do them in the morning and try to set the stage early so my stress level stays down, because I realize that if I don't do those things, I jump out of bed and just go do something. It's like, of course that's going to happen every now and then, but if I don't do those things beforehand, I realize the rest of my day sometimes gets thrown out of whack. Yeah. Whether that just be baseball, whether that be the way I maybe react to my wife or kids. I don't want that to play a part in me being angry and stressful and being stressed.
Yeah.
So I started noticing those things, and that was so I just brought that example up because that was an eye-opening experience for me as far as, okay, stress is really important as far as your health. And I don't want that to be an excuse for me to not be healthy. So let's try to find ways to bring down the stress level.
Yeah. And I guess if you were teaching this right now to let's say your kids or a younger, because I know obviously we're going to talk a little bit more about extraordinary athletes in a minute, but how do you teach this now knowing what you went through and all this kind of strategies and techniques to improve your overall health and wellness and nutrition and all this? Let's say, for example, meditation, all those different things like that. How would you teach it to somebody to say, let's try to implement something like this? How would you ease them into it? Or maybe how did you do it yourself to kind of turn it into a habit? We talk in our program a lot about habit creation and the fact that our habits typically have an anatomy. So they have something that triggers them. It's a routine that you follow, and then followed by something like a reward or something like this. A bad habit typically has a fourth component, which is guilt. A good habit doesn't have that. It's just more of a reward. It's a good reward. So of course, that's kind of how you kind of break it down. And we all create habits that are, whether it's good or bad, without realizing really what they actually entail. Now for you, let's say, for example, the example of meditation or eating right and all those different things. How would you teach it to somebody? Let's say somebody listening to this, a younger guy, he wants to be a professional baseball athlete, and he's just trying to learn new different things that they can implement to their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I would start with my own personal experiences, telling him how it helped me first and foremost, and the downfalls that when I wasn't doing it. And then I would go into, okay, let's make a list of things that you think are beneficial or that can be beneficial to you, especially a baseball player. I feel like a lot of times we're naive to what goes on outside of the baseball field. So for me, if I can tell him, okay, start maybe tracking your sleep, or start maybe tracking if you're meditating, what happens those days, maybe a journal. For me, I've tried to always keep a journal, and whether it be how I do on the field, but also off the field. And then going to somebody like a Vive Nutrition, something that you're able to talk to and learn more about it, because obviously I don't know everything about it, and I can't read every book. So I need to actually go to somebody who specializes in that and learn more about it and figure out a way to develop a plan for myself. So I think that's probably a huge thing as well. Just try to lean on mentors that have been there already.
Accountability, that's a big powerful thing for me.
Exactly. I think that's because it's easy to say that we're going to do something, but when we don't actually do it and follow through. It's
like we're going back to nutrition. You knew what you were supposed to do because your parents taught you how to do it, or your parents told you need to eat right, you need to do all these different things. You never did it yourself, though, because there just really wasn't, you even were not held accountable for those specific things, or you were not holding yourself accountable for those specific things. So I think it's just kind of makes a big difference as far as that.
And then also, if you see somebody else doing it, you're going along with somebody else. I think that's big too. So my parents can tell me to be nutrition conscious, see what you're eating. But if I don't see them doing it, it's going to be hard for me to do it, So if I have the same plan and I can say, okay, me and Johnny or whatever, hey, let's start focusing on some of these things and we do it together. Not only do I have an accountability partner, I can see how it works for him too, or if it doesn't work for him.
Is that what you think is going to happen with your kids? The way you want to kind of to then model that and kind of the kind of things that when you see your kids grow up, the way that they carry themselves and the way that they take care of themselves. Is that kind of how you see it happening?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that the kids are less than 2 years apart, because they can kind of do things together, and they can hopefully be able to be, in some of the same sports and see how certain things benefit both of them or don't. But I want them to look at me first and foremost and say, okay, he's not only telling me that this is probably good for me to eat or probably good for me to do, but he's doing it too. So that's huge for myself.
Yeah, because I think with kids, and there's people who listen to a podcast that have kids, and I think when it comes down to nutrition, we're just so used to like parents being imposing of like, you have to eat this, you have to eat your vegetables, you cannot get out of the table until you do this.
Right.
But that just becomes more, and I think those are the people that kind of grow up like hating vegetables, hating things like this, because it was just more of like, this was imposed on me. Mm-hmm. Instead, it's just, and what you're saying is like, let them model what, you're doing. Like, I'm going to eat my broccoli because this is good for me. Like, and this is what I tell people, is like, you can choose, like, so when you're talking to your kids, you can choose to do so. Right. This is what the benefits of that. Now, if you don't want to, that's up to you.
Right.
But
that's huge. And I think today, a lot of times, we haven't really touched on this, but the social media aspect of things, like if I see Vive Nutrition telling me, okay, this is the right way to go about it, and then I see them posting things that don't look like, okay, what they're preaching, then we have an issue. So like, I don't want my kids to say, oh, so-and-so is they look like a great baseball player. They're posting that they're eating this and this. And I'm like, okay, those things don't line up. I don't want you to think social media is the thing that is perfect. I want them to see it firsthand from me and see, okay, he's telling me one thing, he's doing it as well. I see the benefits. So I think those things have to line up.
Yeah. And now speaking of social media, because obviously I think you as an athlete, pro athlete, and sort of in a way influencer too, what are some of the things that you feel kind of strongly about of what you see on social media that sometimes, and it could be related specifically to like the health and wellness, nutrition, like fitness type of area, that you feel like it's kind of sending maybe the wrong message, or it's affecting kids or athletes, like, growing up right now, that you feel like could change or could be a little bit different?
And I think you mentioned the word as an influencer. I think for me, it's like everybody is an influencer today. They have it all under their bio, Facebook, social media, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be. But for me, if you can't positively influence somebody, then you shouldn't call yourself an influencer. Yeah. I'm all for, okay, let me get my followers up. Let me make sure that, I have people that are following me. But if I'm not leading them in the right direction, if I'm not showing them where I'm going, and that's a positive manner and a positive route, then I can't call myself a leader. I can't call myself an influencer. So for me, I think the social media is so bombarded with people calling themselves influencer, but they're not really helping people. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm all about an influencer that's helping me lead me to a positive direction. And that's what I would like to see more of on that social media side, whether that be in the health industry, in the wellness industry, the athletic industry, in all industries. I want to see these people that have the followers to lead them in a place where they should be led.
Yeah, and I think I think some people are starting to understand that shift. Like, we recently watched like this like documentary with, I feel strongly about documentaries, but I think obviously this was well put together with like this guy Zac Efron and like Down to Earth, and I should rewatch it. Yeah. But it was a cool way, and he talked about it like, I want to use my platform to positively create like, like something that is just more than a movie, and I think that was really impactful. And I think many athletes need to start to use their platforms to positively, create like impact, which obviously kind of leads to Xtradordinary Athlete, because I want to hear a little more about what you're doing, because I think it's really cool. So tell us a little bit more about what Xtradordinary Athlete is and what's kind of your vision and what you're trying to do with this.
Yes, yeah. So Xtradordinary Athletes was built last year around December, November. I knew that I wanted a platform for athletes, especially youth athletes, to understand that they have influence and that they have an impact, but not just on the baseball field, on the football field, on the court, whatever it may be. I want them to realize their impact outside of their sport. And for that, you need to learn life skills. For me, it's like goal setting. We talked about routine, talked about being a leader. Like, a lot of times, athletes especially, I feel like, hey, go be a leader. Hey, go set some goals for yourself. But what does that really look like when you break it down? Like, same thing with nutrition. Somebody can tell me what to eat, but why? What's the why behind it? So those are things like nutrition. We don't learn those in school, like about leadership, goal setting, routine, self-discipline. A lot of times we don't learn that in school. So that's what I wanted to build, was an environment to learn those types of things. And hopefully here at the end of the year, it will be an actual physical location along with Yo Murphy and his athletic performance, his new athletic performance facility. I want to incorporate that alongside with it, because not only do you need the training, physical training, but you need that mental training as well. So that's what I've tried to do with my platform. And so I had a camp in December, and in February in San Diego. That was not just a baseball camp, but it was a learning experience for the youth as well. And I want to be able to provide that, whether that be via podcast, social media, whatever that may be, documentaries on athletes as well. So just being able to have an opportunity for those athletes to learn more how to build those skills.
Yeah, because I feel like it's like what you're saying, like all these like people, and I grew up, or not a whole lot in sports, but then in my career as a sports dietitian, I saw it all the time. Like it's coaches telling people, go be a leader, go do this. But then it's like, okay, but what are break it down for me. How do I do this? You know, like what are the strategies that be able to kind of help me get to that point, and kind of turn it into digestible kind of like pieces that people can understand and how to kind of implement. So that's really powerful. One last question I have for you before we move into like the rapid fire questions. What would you tell, like, how old are you right now?
I'm 32.
32. Are you 88?
87.
Okay, I'm 88. Yeah, I'm 32. Okay, gotcha. You're 32 years old right now. When you look back and you can have a conversation like right now, let's say like, you know, you're across from you, it's like your 20-year-old self. Mm-hmm. What would be some of the lessons or things that you would tell that person right now?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is don't be afraid to ask questions. Like if you don't know about something, go ask somebody that knows about it. If you don't know about nutrition, go ask Vive Nutrition about it. If you don't know something about baseball, go ask somebody that you know has made it, or a coach that you can learn more about. I think especially at a young age, we're like so afraid to ask people about things.
And I think it's even in men, dude. Like it's like men are just afraid to ask questions, because I feel like we were just having this conversation yesterday with somebody about like body image in men, which is a big thing, but nobody talks about it. You hear it all about women, but like it's kind of the status quo of like men is you're supposed to be the person that knows everything, like knows like all this stuff, and they're like you're saying afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. And then also along with that is like learn as much as you can about it too. Don't just expect that somebody just teaches you about it. You know, don't expect you're going to learn everything in school. Go on your own and go research something that you want to learn more about. So for me, I think if I would have known that would have helped me as well, because I could start figuring out things a little bit faster. I could go, okay, instead of me being scared to ask my coach, like, hey, what are my weaknesses? You know, that's important to learn, because I can turn those things into strengths and become a better player. So just being able to ask questions and going and be able to research and learn more about it, read. We have so many resources now with the internet, YouTube, Google. Go find out what you don't know or what you want to know.
And I think they could be probably summarized into like education, like it's going to be one, and then accountability, which is being able to ask somebody something that can kind of, you know, like, so you can understand how things, you don't have to do this alone, basically. And I think that's like the bigger thing, which I think is what happens to most people. When I was growing my business, I was like, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. I never asked questions, and I'm like, and then for 2 years, like, you know, complete failure until like, okay, I'm going to ask for help. And I think that's like a bigger thing. So awesome.
Definitely a man thing too.
We don't want to. We don't like to ask people for help. Like that's a big thing.
But I don't want to look back, and I'm sure the same is for you, is like be like 60, 70 years old and like, I didn't do what I wanted to do because I didn't ask somebody about it. You know, how dumb does that sound? Yeah,
because it's that. It's like there's some things that we kind of get good at, and then we're like, okay, it's absolutely crazy to ask for questions about this because I should know this. And it's kind of like that shameful kind of feeling that sometimes like we kind of have. So, but that's awesome. We're going to finish this up with some rapid fire questions, and you can tell us about Xtradordinary Athlete and how we can find you. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So there are 4 simple ones. Number 1, what's your favorite movement exercise that you like to do?
My favorite movement exercise, man, that's a good one. When I'm on all fours, I like to do, like I didn't like it at first, but I realized like how much it opens up my hips and everything else, like the hip circles on all fours, hip circles. because I never liked doing it, and I didn't realize, okay, why are people on the ground doing hip circles, right? But I realized like how much that's helped me, especially in my career.
Awesome, love it. What is a book that you would gift to somebody that you need to be putting on their shelf?
Yeah,
it could be anything.
Yeah, that's a good one. I just read a book not too long ago called Good to Great. And I can't even remember who the author was, but it was a book that it really kind of resonated with me because I understood, okay, that transition to be good is cool. Everybody's okay with that, but it takes another level to really, be great in not just one aspect of your life, but every aspect. So Good to Great, I think.
I love that because one of the things that one of my mentors in nutrition actually taught me when I was working with athletes was nutrition can make a good athlete, you can make an average athlete great, but also nutrition can make a great athlete just average. So it was just something that I was now that I think about it, that's good. We're gonna look up the author. We're gonna make it. We add it to the show notes. What is a podcast or resource online that you feel like you would recommend people to kind of check out? And you can do a complete shameless plug of your podcast. Anything you want, but anything that you feel like it's impacting you, or if you don't really listen to podcasts videos or whatever that you feel like is good education.
For me, of course, you have to check out Xtradordinary Athletes podcast. We're breaking down the athletes and what separates them to get to the next level. But also I've enjoyed another baseball podcast, but it kind of goes on the inside of just life in general. And it's called Heckle D's by Adam Jones. He's an outfielder who played in the MLB, but now he plays in Japan, and he's with his family in Japan. So he kind of talks about the background of going over to Japan, playing over there, the differences over there, and just differences in culture, and how he grew up. And so I think it's pretty cool. It's called Heckle D's. Cool.
We're going to link it up in the show notes as well. Last question would be, if you were stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life, and you could choose only one food and one food only, what would you take?
Man, one food on
rice and soup.
The funny thing is, I ask people this same thing on my podcast, and I don't really think about it. For me, I think it would have to be my mom. She makes this fried chicken. I have to go with the fried chicken.
Soul food. We gotta go with the soul food.
I gotta go with the soul food.
Nice. That's
and if you can throw some cornbread on the side.
There you go. You can pull a full meal. You're just gonna have to have it for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, we gotta go with the fried chicken. We gotta go cornbread and macaroni and cheese, all for my mom. She makes it usually Thanksgiving, Christmas time.
Yeah.
I eat that and go straight to sleep.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of those. How can people find you at X? How can people reach out to you, talk to you, and get in contact?
Yeah, for Xtradordinary Athletes, just go xoathletes.com. A great platform for everybody, not just athletes. And then Instagram and Twitter, Xavier_Scruggs. Come hit me up, slide in my DMs. I answer questions all the time.
Good.
I'm very interactive and engaging with all the fan followers and just everybody in general.
Awesome. Well, yeah, you guys heard it directly from X. So if you guys have any questions, make sure that you go on the show notes, and we're gonna try to make sure we link up all this information over, so you can reach out and get connected with them. X, it's been a pleasure to have you being Nutrition Radio today. Hopefully we'll bring you back again to maybe just tell us what you got going on before you kind of make it big time to ESPN, big time podcasts and stuff. But once again, thank you again.